and wanted their car to feel like it belonged to their generation, not the one before it. Of course, this wasn't a careless decision. It was impulsive, but calculated. Pontiac knew the risk. They knew humor doesn't always age well. They knew tying a car's identity to pop culture could backfire if the moment passed too quickly. But they also knew something else. If they wanted this new GTO to feel rebellious, affordable, and different from the polished muscle cars flooding the market, then the name had to break the same rules the car did. It couldn't sound safe. It couldn't sound timeless. It had to sound now. So someone took a phrase meant to get a laugh and decided to bolt it onto a muscle car. And once that happened, there was no turning back. Not everyone was laughing. The moment the name The Judge started circulating inside General Motors, the mood shifted. What sounded clever and youthful to some people sounded reckless to others, and the pushback came fast. To a lot of executives, the name felt dangerous for one simple reason. It didn't feel permanent. Muscle cars were supposed to sound tough, serious, timeless. And here was Pontiac tying a performance car to a television joke, something that could disappear from the culture as quickly as it appeared. What happened when the show went off the air? What happened when the joke stopped landing? Would the car still make sense? Or would it feel embarrassing? That fear wasn't hypothetical. Inside GM, branding was taken seriously, and for good reason. A name could define a car for decades. Get it right, and it becomes legendary. Get it wrong, and you're stuck explaining it forever. Some executives thought the Judge sounded childish. Others thought it undercut the GTO's hard-earned reputation. And a few worried it would confuse buyers who didn't understand the reference at all. If someone had to explain the name before explaining the car, that was already a problem. This is where the tension really showed. Pontiac was known for pushing limits, but this felt like they were pushing culture itself, not just performance. They were betting that youth trends wouldn't just influence sales. It wasn't a gimmick hiding behind decals and hype. It felt aggressive, loud, and unapologetic in a way the GTO had slowly drifted away from. The car didn't ask to be taken seriously. It forced the issue. And Pontiac made sure it looked the part. The Judge stood out before it ever moved. The graphics were bold, the colors were impossible to miss, and nothing about it blended in. It didn't look like a toned-down GTO or a corporate compromise. It looked like a challenge on wheels. Park one next to anything else on the lot, and you knew exactly which car wasn't trying to be polite. But the real shift happened once the car started earning respect where it mattered most, in the real world. On the street, the Judge backed up the attitude. It wasn't just noise and image. It delivered the kind of performance that shut down skepticism fast. The same people who questioned the name stopped talking about it once they saw how it ran, how it launched, and how confidently it held its own against the competition. That's when the gamble paid off. The name stopped sounding like a joke and started sounding like a statement. The Judge wasn't there to explain itself. It wasn't there to impress everyone. It was there to dominate conversations, parking lots, and stoplight encounters. And it did exactly that. What almost backfired became the very thing that made it unforgettable. Once the performance matched the attitude, the name didn't need defending anymore. It became part of the legend. And in that moment, Pontiac proved something critical. If the product is strong enough, even the riskiest idea can turn into an identity people rally behind. Pontiac didn't win by playing it safe. They won by leaning straight into the risk. Look at the names everyone else was using at the time. Animals, strength, speed. Words that sounded tough no matter when you heard them. They were safe, predictable, and effective. But they also blended together once the market got crowded. The Judge didn't blend in at all. It didn't tell you how fast the car was. It didn't hint at horsepower or domination. It made you stop and think for half a second. And that pause was powerful. In a sea of muscle cars all shouting the same message, Pontiac chose a name that made people look twice. That's why it worked. Risky branding cuts through noise because it forces a reaction. You either get it or you don't. And Pontiac was fine with that. The Judge wasn't trying to appeal to everyone in the showroom. It was speaking directly to buyers who wanted something that felt rebellious, current, and a little bit defiant. And that taps into something deeper. Rebellion is attractive because it feels personal. Owning a car like the Judge wasn't just about speed, it was about attitude. You weren't buying a generic muscle car. You were buying into an identity that said you didn't care if everyone approved, as long as you stood out. That's the lesson hidden inside this story. Pontiac understood that culture moves faster than tradition. They understood that younger buyers weren't looking for timeless. They were looking for now. And by anchoring the car to that moment, they made it unforgettable. The name worked because it was risky, because it didn't play by the rules, and because in the muscle car era, being different wasn't a liability. It was